bat. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Constructing Art. To be perfectly honest, if you're a boy and girl and you're watching this, good on you, because you're going to learn some things today, because we're going to talk about things on how you can get from rags to riches, not in a way of having yourself a Learjet, but in a way that you can set yourself up that you don't need to worry about all the bad things that could happen in life. And the person that we're going to be talking to about that is none other than a dear, dear friend, one of my best mates that we've gotten to get to know each other over the last 4 years. And over that time, we've created a bond and we share lots of things. And what he'll be telling you today is some stories about how he went from living in a container to owning his own home outright, right? Would you say a short period of time? Daniel, welcome. Welcome to the Constructing Art podcast, mate.
I can't tell you how honored I am that you've selected me for the Christmas special this year, Kenny.
You had to drop that in, didn't you? It is the Christmas special.
I did. I had to get that in there. It's the Christmas special, obviously.
It has to be because it's Christmas Eve.
It is Christmas Eve.
And it's storming outside. We live about, 20 kilometres away from each other. And we've just had a big storm come through.
It's beautiful Brisbane summer weather.
It is. My fence out the front's fallen over again. So
I think we still have a couple of trees in the front yard.
Well, you have a couple of trees in the front yard on your acreage out there.
We probably have a couple of extra trees in the front yard.
From your neighbours.
Yeah, exactly.
So Daniel, your story, some people don't think that their own stories are very important or other people want to hear them or other people can learn from them. Though I've certainly learned a lot from your stories in the time that we've spent together, from relationships to business to how you got by in hard times and now how you set goals for yourself to achieve. And that goal setting thing is something that you've always seemed to do regardless of the situation you're in. So give us a bit of a background as to what you do, what the business, about your business, more so about what you do in business and your approach to it.
Yeah, no problem. So we're Soularch. We're a relatively boutique, which is a kind way of saying small Salesforce consultancy and advisory service. We build Salesforce applications and help people streamline their business processes on the platform. Business is mostly family affair. Myself, my wife, we've got a couple of developers who are good friends from a long time. And we are based just south of Brisbane. It's much easier to say south of Brisbane than Greenbank because no one knows where Greenbank is. But we're about 45 minutes out of Brisbane City. And we run a fully remote Salesforce consultancy.
So what is a Salesforce consultancy?
That's a really good question. If you're an IT person, then I would say we're a Salesforce dev shop, and you would know what that means. For the layman, Salesforce is a CRM platform. That's an oversimplification because essentially you can model any data or business processes on Salesforce as a platform. But it's essentially something to help businesses sell more and to automate their business processes. But like a lot of software, it's got a lot of available tools in the kit. There's a lot of things that you can do with it. But essentially, when a customer is signing up onto the platform, they get a hold of licenses and they get access to the platform. But there's a lot of expertise that goes into needing to understand what they do in business and then how you can then use the tools in the box to help them do that. So that's where businesses like ours come in, where we engage with the customer, over time, hopefully become a trusted advisor and a partner and help them map out what they're trying to do with their business into the data model and the processes that their software platform is supporting.
Okay, so in a sentence, you make business A work with Salesforce beautifully.
That would
Is
be
that
a way of
basically right?
saying it. Yeah, I would say we help a business to get their processes running smoothly.
Right. Okay. So over the journey from when you were young man, teenager, growing up with all the crazy stuff in the world, through to owning and operating a seven-figure and growing business. Um, when you were a teenager and looking for what to do in life, what was the first step that you can recognize, or first goal that you can recognize that helped you know, hey, I can achieve something more, and that led you to where you are now? So taking back to, late teens.
A good question, because it took me a long time to figure myself out. I only started on this particular journey a couple of years ago, to be honest. I think I was, in my teens, I wasn't that interested in school. I didn't finish high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I did a lot of traveling and a lot of, just picking up jobs on the fly, traveled around America, did laboring, that sort of stuff. And I guess in my early 20s, I started to think, well, maybe I should get myself together, get some kind of a qualification. Went to university, started in civil engineering, didn't finish that either. Really just didn't know where I was going to end up. And I stumbled into software development by accident, to be honest. I guess I always kind of knew that I had an entrepreneurial attitude. I started working with a mate of mine who was running little website builds. And I guess I recognized in him this kindred spirit, in that he wanted to be running his own show. He wanted to be delivering projects for people. He wanted to be winning his own work, delivering good results for his customers, but not as a clock in, clock out employee. And I sort of
Yeah.
resonated with that. That's probably where it all started. And it also, interestingly, led me into software development, because it was from that company we started to work together. We became partners. We started to grow a customer base. And then he ended up moving over to the States to have a crack at growing the business over there, which left me running the Australian business. And just purely by accident, some of those customers were on Salesforce. So I started to learn Salesforce and then took off on that trajectory. But I would say it was from company was Driven Action, and a mate of mine, Adrian Barkas, who probably first gave me that spark of recognizing that I didn't really belong in a day-to-day, number of hours, pay per hour kind of a scenario. It just didn't really work for me.
Right. So you knew or when you resonated with him, you resonated that this hourly rate thing, that you had this drive of some sort, that you weren't sure what it was for, what it was for, what it was, and what to do with it. But you knew that you had to do something.
Yeah, I mean, he was a really interesting guy, because he also didn't have any diploma type qualifications or university degrees at the time, but he had this real passion and spark and confidence in himself that he could sell, and that he would figure out some way to deliver. And there was something about that just kind of lit a fire for me to to want to be able to have that sort of confidence myself, I guess, and to go and do something similar. And so then I
So
went down that path, started to acquire my Salesforce skills.
how long from when you started, say, in this situation, Salesforce, how long from when you first understood, hey, if I acquire these skills, how long was it from there to the point where you went out and started you started Soularch?
Yeah, it's interesting because that sentence, you fake it till you make it. And that's kind of true. Like the first opportunity I was given was kind of, um, everyone knew I was winging it, and that's cool. But I was also doing 80 to 100-hour weeks, burning the candle at both ends, putting in the hard yards to learn the skill. I'd go to a customer and figure out what their requirements were, and I had no idea how to deliver them on the platform. So I'd spend, 4 to 6 hours that night learning what I had to do, working through the weekends, doing courses. Like, I worked hard to gain the skill that I needed as fast as I needed to be able to keep the job. But after a few years of that, obviously, then you've built up a bit of a base and now you know what you're doing, which is also interesting too, because I worked, so I'd gone from employee, attempt at a business, multiple failures, back to the security of being an employee. And having failed at business a few times, I was very reluctant to go again. In fact, people would often ask me, why don't you open your own consultancy? And like I found out later that most of my friends and close associates in the business fully expected me to be running a business. And I was just utterly mentally not interested in facing the risk, essentially.
Mm.
I wanted the security of going to work, knowing that I was going to earn X amount. I didn't have the fear of paying anyone's wages. I didn't have overheads. I didn't have insurances. I didn't have taxes. It was all nice and steady and secure. And it took a lot of work, mostly from Natasha, to get me over the hurdle of, no, you actually got this. You know what you need to know. Now let's just face the fear and get on with it. And so that was a whole story in itself. But
Well, the lion
it's
is always
interesting. I
stronger with
did
pride
need to
behind it,
learn the
right?
skills and have the base. What was that?
The lion is always stronger. The male lion is always stronger and more confident with its pride behind it.
Percent. And in that analogy, it's the lionesses that hunt.
Natasha.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, she's the inspiration and the drive behind all of it. Really, I would probably still be working a wage if she hadn't, pushed me past my boundaries and supported me through it.
So
But it was
we'll come
interesting. I
back to
needed
the
to learn the
family.
base.
We'll come back to the family thing in a
Cool.
moment. Um, learning the bass and then pushing out to start your Soularch is a fairly
Mm.
recent thing. So how many years has it been since you started Soularch?
Yeah, so we started Soularch in the middle of COVID. To be honest, when that whole world change situation occurred, I won't mention the name in case you need to cut it out of the podcast because some people don't like it when you say the word out loud. But all of a sudden the world changed and everyone was working from home, and it also meant that software development culture kind of changed. Customers became much more aware of being able to deliver remote, so it opened up some massive opportunities for us. And we just decided, look, why don't we just pull the trigger and jump, and we'll go. So again, I wasn't ready to just launch in all out. So what I decided I was going to do was I was going to keep my day job. I was used to working long hours, so I stayed at my job, and we went to the accountant. We put the company together, got all of our legals together, and started to pick up some customers on the side. So the start was pretty intense because I was working a full-time development job and then running the business as well, and the business was me. So I was working minimum 80 to 100 hours a week to keep pace with that. But the benefit from that, from my point of view, was I personally work a lot better when I know that I've got a bit of a safety net. Like, it's all good taking risks, but you also need to be intelligent about what you're doing. Now, if I had 50 or 100 grand up my sleeve and been able to afford to just focus on building the business for 6 months without sweating how my kids were going to eat, fine. Maybe I quit the job, jump into the business. It probably would have grown faster, but we didn't have that kind of savings. So I stayed on, kept earning the wage, and we did the business on top of it. And yeah, I mean, it's slow in the beginning, but it's also super exciting. You win your first contracts and you send your first invoice and you get paid for one developer for 1 week, and it's like more money than you're used to making in a month, and all of a sudden it shows up in a lump in your bank account. It was pretty exciting when you start building a business. There's lots of little happy moments there. And then also the other ones when you end up having to pay your bills and all of a sudden thousands of dollars disappear in an afternoon. So that's fun too.
Interesting, the difference of mindset it makes when going as an employee to a employer, as how you now have to handle money in a totally different way. So you've taken from, if we say COVID being in 2020, now we're about to go into 2024. So you've had 3 to 3.5 years of running Soularch as a business, which is pretty much the entirety of our relationship. And you've taken it from where you were with, which I didn't know before now, that you had these failed, like you'd gone and failed, you'd worked for someone, you'd gone back to the security blanket of a full-time job, which there's nothing wrong with. If you, like you said before, if you're anxious with all of those things, well, you probably shouldn't be doing it. You should go back to the full-time job. And then the mindset is a big one of having to tackle the ability of going, well, I now need to be responsible for other people, not just myself. And
Right.
we had a chat yesterday over breakfast, and you said how you've been able to pay off your home. And in doing so, you've done that because of the values that brings to your family. You've been able to do that in 3.5 years. So I know your work
Yeah.
ethic. Yes, you work for yourself, but you're not doing a 40-hour work week now. You might do that when you're on holiday.
No.
But while you're traveling, you'll do a 40-hour work week. That's you. So it's not that, hey, I now gone from doing a 40-hour work week for someone else, and now I do a 40-hour work week, and I make it a heck of a lot more money. Yes, I've got more responsibility, and the risk is higher. You've brought your work ethic, and you've gone, hey, I can drive something, and I've set myself goals to achieve. Now I'm going to come back to this because you've just paid off your home.
Yeah.
Or at least you have made it interest neutral, should we say? And I'm not sure if you wanted me to be telling the world about all of this stuff.
We'll just call it paid off. I don't know if I'll get into the financial back and forth on something that'll go out into the world, because some bloody accountant will ping me with, you should be doing blah blah blah.
Oh, well, I know your setup and how you've got that. You've got no issues with what you're doing. Let's go back to the story of the container, where you had the opportunity to buy your first property, which was a really weird one.
Yeah.
Take it to that.
Yeah. So putting this in the time sequence, this was when I was at the end of the period where I was failing at running my own businesses. And there was this little transition phase where I'd basically decided that I was an unsuccessful entrepreneur and that I was going to need to get a job, but I didn't have any skills and I didn't know how I was going to get started. So in this little interim transition period, I was on the dole doing a certificate 3 in project management, and I basically didn't have an income. But I was also totally committed that I wanted to buy a house, which is, I don't know what was going on in my head, but I had decided that I was going to buy a house, and somehow or another I was going to find a way. So what I did, like I do with anything, I decide on some crazy goal, and then I just start to work out, well, okay, what do I need to know to do that? How do I start to break it down? And actually, this is an interesting point because you've asked me about this a few times. I don't start from working out whether my goal is realistic or not. I don't, as the first computation, I don't figure out whether or not that goal should be my goal. That's not something that I do. I decide on what I want to do, and then I just decide, okay, that's where we're going. And it doesn't matter if it's realistic or unrealistic or whatever. I mean, when we were chatting over breakfast the other day, you said something very similar. If you set a totally unrealistic goal and you go hammer and tongs at it, and you end up achieving 50% of what you set out to achieve, well, you're probably a long way ahead of someone that carefully curated a nice, realistic goal and then set out to achieve it, So I don't do it that way. I decide on whatever the crazy dream is, but then I realistically go after what would I need to do to get there. So in this case, I wanted to own a house. Well, how does a person who's on the dole with no income buy a house? I was like, okay. Well, I thought, I've got some rent assistance, and I've got, the amount that I'm paying for rent. And I looked over my finances and I thought, okay, well, cool. How do I convince someone to sell me a house when I can pay them $150 a week? Like, okay, well, how do I start working that out? I got a hold of the idea of vendor finance, and I worked out that somehow or another, I think I was like, all right, well, I'm going to start working. I'm not going to be on the dole forever. I will come up with some money. What I need is someone who is willing to sell me the property directly from themselves and avoid all of the rules and regulations and everything that goes in the bank. That way, it's just a gentleman's agreement between me and someone else that trusts me. And as long as I can keep the payments, then we're good. So I went down that direction, and I started oh man, it was hilarious. So I started showing up at land sales and stuff, and then chatting to the owner and trying to convince them that they should basically just give me their house. But I called it vendor finance, right? So I was like, yeah, we should put it in the contract, blah, blah, blah. I'll pay you the rent over 30 years. I'll own the house. Anyway, I had some crazy ideas. But what was cool about it, right, was I started pursuing the goal. And I mean, what I've found is even when you look back on it and you go, wow, I was a total lunatic. If someone had approached me with that idea today, I would laugh them out of the house, right? But in the real world, it led me closer to my goal. I started to look at what I could do, and I started to go out. And every time I went out and talked to someone, I learned a little bit more. And I was like, okay, that approach won't work. Let me try this other one. Let me go that way. Let me try another angle. And every step of the way, I was acquiring knowledge and skill. So what ended up happening, actually, is one of my best mates, his mum needed to sell a block of land. It was a long way out of the city, 7 acres of lantana, about a half an acre of usable land, and an old house that needed renovating. But they had a need. They needed to get rid of it. And mostly, they needed to stop being responsible for the payments. So I was like, okay, do you trust me that some way or another I will make it work and I will handle the payments? Yes. Okay, cool. So then we agreed that I could move in, I could start making the repayments, and the money that I paid towards rent, we would consider was towards the deposit when I bought it, when I got on my feet and I could afford the loan. Cool. So I basically had a vendor finance property. It wasn't legally mine. It wasn't my name on the title, but we had an agreement to buy. We had an agreement on what I was going to buy it for, and I could move in and I could start to make improvements on it, and I could essentially treat it like it was mine. So that's how I got into the Jumbumba property. And like I say, it was about 6.5 acres of lantana, and but I moved in and I considered it mine. And then I started building the container home. And it was it was also at that same time that I got that first job in Salesforce. So I landed somewhere. I was starting to apply the skills, you know, and being ridiculously poor, I didn't have much in the way of expenses. So I went into, working a decent job, earning a decent wage, and just saved everything. And after a few months, had enough of a deposit, had enough of a work history, could get a proper bank loan, could actually buy the property, and about 6 months later, settled on it.
Right. And how did that change your world?
Oh, completely. I mean, well, for one thing, getting back to the container story, right? So
Well,
I
I'm
was all
so
about
keen to get to this
getting
container story.
I was all about securing my base, right? And owning my own place. I didn't want to be throwing money away anymore. So even when we got our, gentleman's agreement on how I was going to, how I was going to buy the property off this person, um, I didn't have enough money to renovate the house. I didn't have enough money to do any of those things. I was just like committedly saving to buy the block. So I figured out that I could I could do a shipping container conversion. I had been looking into, you know, various eco-friendly building options that people can do themselves. You look at like hippie communes and all of that sort of stuff, and there's all of these construction techniques where, if you've got clay on your land, you can make your own brick and then start building that into a house. Or there's these straw bale houses where, you lay a foundation, you put the straw bales on the wall, and then you put chicken wire over it and render it. There's all of these, you look them up.
Daniel's
There's some
grand design.
really interesting, creative things that people have worked out to do their own accommodations. But I also had some mates that had done it. I have some mates down in just on the other side of Canungra that decided to make a hippie sea change and built a straw bale house, and it was brilliant. I'd been down there a few times over the weekend, and it was great. So I decided I was going to build a shipping container conversion. Plus, I figured if you deliver a shipping container onto a block, right, and it comes with doors and it comes with a roof. So worst case scenario, you're not being rained on. You might not have power, but you can get in and out. You can stop the animals from getting in and out, and it's got a roof. And then you can essentially live in it while you renovate and you start working on it. So that's what I did. We took off into the back section of the 6.5 acres of Lantana, cleared a path that a truck could come down and deliver a container. I was so poor at the time for the stumps that the container was going to get delivered on. I mean, forget the fact that this doesn't conform to building code or anything. I didn't know anything about that at the time, but I didn't needed the container, right? So we had to clear a couple of trees. We didn't own a chainsaw, so I was clearing these things with a hatchet about a foot long by hand. And then asked a mate who did own a chainsaw to come over for a weekend. And because, he had one, so then we cleaned up a couple of stumps that were of a uniform height now, hand dug where we were going to put the foundations, and used stumps from the trees that we'd cut down by hand as the foundation for the shipping container when it got delivered. So that was about 2 months worth of weekends, and then the truck goes trundling off into the bush and delivers this shipping container down near a nice, lovely little bend in the creek. It was gorgeous, and that was my first home.
That's a container home of sorts. When you hear container homes these days, you think this beautiful retreat of a thing where they customize the doors, and it's all quite architectural. Yours sounds,
Yeah, that's
with no
gorgeous.
disrespect, a bit more Vietnam prison camp.
Yeah, exactly. I was committed to having a place that was my own, and having the things that I invested in it belong to me and not be indebted to others. But sometimes the road between here and there can be a little rocky.
Well,
The
even
first
Elon
winter
Musk
was,
slept
oh
in
my
an
gosh, it was a
office. He rented
disaster.
an office. Elon Musk rented an office, slept on the floor or on the couch in the office because it was cheaper in New York, I think it was, to have that. And they showered at the YMCA
At the gym.
and then
Yeah.
started their business from that, right? So
That was back in the
everyone,
PayPal days, wasn't it?
right, yeah. And Steve Jobs started in his parents' garage. I mean, it's a matter of it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what you have, is it? It's a matter of just putting in, putting in, putting in, and continuing to put in over and over and over again, regardless of your creature comforts,
Yeah.
because you just go for what you go for. So taking that, I would love you to share one more story about your shower, because this really painted the picture of who you are as a person that I didn't know before, and the development that you've made in yourself, and the progress and the growth, because you're the same person essentially. Um,
Mm.
though we were talking before about how you can't change someone. People can't be changed unless the person changes themselves. So you ticked
Yeah,
your
that's
boxes.
right.
You've now got your first home, the
Yeah.
container home.
An actual one, not a shipping. You can see this is the
Well,
front
yes,
of us. It's got
yes, you
actual
now have
walls.
quite a lovely home. But at the time you had your
Yeah, it's all
container
right.
home. Now containers don't have plumbing.
Yeah.
Containers don't have electricity. Um, you had doors and a roof, so you had somewhere to sleep that was
Yeah.
an upgrade to a cave.
It was a really fancy cave.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
and
had
nowhere near what a
the
man cave would
long
be.
story short, no, not even as good as a man cave. The average exercise pain cave would have been 3 steps up from where I was living at the time. So
How did you feed
as
yourself and
time went
clothe
by,
yourself and wash?
mate, I had solutions for everything because there was another house on the block, right? But I wanted my own. And when I say house, remember I was saying like this is it was like a really old. I think it was maybe built in the 20s or 30s, and then it had been relocated in the 80s. And so the house that existed on the block, some other people were in it and renting, and it needed renovation, but it was also occupied, so it wasn't like somewhere where there was enough room for me to be. So the shipping container was mine. um I decided to expand, so I got a second shipping container, and saved up some
Cool.
money and got it properly craned onto steel stumps. So that in itself was a massive upgrade, where I got the steel stumps delivered. Actually, used a little bit of the knowledge that I got from my partial civil engineering degree to design a timber boardwalk between the two. So got it craned up onto the stumps, put a boardwalk in between the two, and found a company that does a roof. So saved up for a shipping container roof, steel corro. You put in the dimensions and everything, and they basically send you out a massive IKEA flat pack of steel with some instructions on how you build a roof over your containers. So I put that on, and then started working on the internals, closing in the ends and that sort of thing. But the story that you were asking about was the plumbing, because as you say, you know, if you needed the bathroom, you had to walk off through the bush. It was like having an outhouse, except you had to walk about 150 meters up the hill to the other house if you wanted to use the bathroom or take a shower or something like that. So it was a pivotal moment where again, I had a mate who was a plumber, and he had a couple of days free, so I paid him for his time and materials, and he came out, and I was his laborer for the weekend, and we ran around under the house installing the copper piping. So we put a splitter on the water tank after the pump, ran a line over to the container house, and he ran in the cold and hot water. And he had a job where someone had a relatively new Renai gas on demand system, and he was
There we
also a
go.
gas fitter, so he could plumb it in. So I picked that up at half of warehouse cost because it was a waste from a job that wasn't needed, and so I even ended up with hot water, which was absolute gold. But yeah, I mean, after all of that, I had a gas fitting to the lounge room, which was essentially the boardwalk between the two containers, so I could run a heater in winter. That was an enormous comfort. I
It
had
would be in
a
Jumbumba.
cold water point to. Hmm?
It would be in Jumbumba.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I was down by the creek, so whatever the temperatures were on the Jumbumba bomb, take 4 degrees off that, it was cold. Um, but yeah, now I had running water to the bathroom section of the container that I was living in, and hot and cold water to the shower unit, which at that point was literally just a space against the wall that I'd framed up, and I had the sheeting on it, and I waterproofed it. I didn't have the money to buy the tiles to tile it, so it was just green waterproofing. But the plumbing went in, so I had hot and cold water, and I could now have a shower. So that was my bathroom, and it was gold. Had a nice, beautiful 2.1 meter window, about a meter high. I'd be standing there in the shower, looking over the bush and the creek. It was gorgeous.
So really, the fact that it was um, a container home, which was done with the lowest of budgets imaginable, um, there was beautiful moments in it. There's beautiful things that people could spend millions of dollars on and not get.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, you asked how did I cook a meal? Well, I got a from a curbside pickup. Someone had a barbecue that they didn't want anymore, so I picked it up, carried it into the kitchen area, cleaned up the fittings and everything. Because, a barbecue is essentially just some tubes, and as long as they're hollow and the gas will still flow, then it was all good and the fittings still worked. So I would cook on a barbecue, and
Right.
that was on the timber section between the two containers. And then at one end, when I was closing them in, I splurged on a couple of accordion doors. So all along that end, which was facing the creek and the forest section of the property, that was all glass. So I'd be sitting there cooking up a meal on my barbecue, looking out the glass. There'd be sheep wandering around in the yard or kangaroos hopping through or whatever. It was on one level, it was super rudimentary, and most people would look at it and go, "Man, this guy's crazy. How could you live in those conditions?" But it was also really close and connected to nature, and it was gorgeous.
I'm glad that you helped with the segue to where I'm going to next. Um, that keeping the connection to nature and the and your values and what you learned there to what you've learned for now. So you've taken that basic, I think you said rudimentary. I don't even know what that means. But you took this basic container home that ticked boxes for you to be able to survive and live, where you had beautiful things that you valued in that, and you've taken from there to now, and you've built a beautiful home, and you've still got those same type of values where you cook, you've got views over the bushland, and you have all these other things, and
Mm.
you've gone from that. We're doing all this work, and your stories that you've told me over a non-alcoholic wine around the bushfire when we've been camping about the demolition derby and the sending cars through the bush to clear out the lantana and all these other sorts of things and the the animal husbandry that went on at the Jimboomba site. But, where you've now
Oh
gone
yeah,
to living in your home now, you're still doing the same thing, but now you've got your little Komatsu excavator.
interesting, isn't it? Mm. Yeah, we when Natasha and the kids came along, that was a major life-changing event because, how I was living before, and it was great. It had its pros and cons, but I was essentially single, um, and had no real commitments to anyone but myself in that space. When you suddenly have to raise children, that's different. That's different. You can't have kids walking around a construction site or balancing on incomplete floor joists as you're building the front deck. That's just not going to fly with an 8 and a 10-year-old. So much to my dismay, I had to go back to a rental property for a period of time for their sake, which was also great because that was our first home together. But we immediately knew that we were going to be building our own place. And so we began that journey. We went looking for land out here in just in the back of New Beef, which was itself all forest at the time that we found it. Bought the block, waited a year for that to go through all of the civil and council development and all of that jazz, and then started the process of build. Unfortunately, just before the world fell apart with COVID, so we went through all of those challenges with, no one being able to get on site, no one being able to supply materials, all of that sort of jazz, and it took a long time because of that. But yeah, we were going through this process of going into business, building the business, Natasha project managing the build of the house at the same time. All of these things sort of happening concurrently, and then and we finally finished the build in October last year and moved in.
I remember going and seeing the slab when the slab went down, and
Yeah.
the the joy on your family and your faces to I know the joy myself of being on my own slab and going, this is my home. And
Mm,
the
yeah.
love that you guys have for that, it's something that I guess, and here with constructing art, something that it's important to talk, that I want to talk about with constructing art on this podcast, is it doesn't matter what it is that you're building, whether it's a business, whether it's a home, whether it's a car for that matter. If you put passion into it and you have values, not value, but your values go into that
Mm,
piece, that thing, things that matter to the people around you, that you can step back with and go, yes, all is good, and that's what I wanted, and it grows from that, kind of like the story in the Bible of on the seventh day God rested and he looked and saw that it was good, right? So it's kind
mm,
of that in our own selves. And I'm not trying to go down the Christian pathway there. That as an analogy, it is very, very good because you've done that with your first build, which you wouldn't necessarily call it art in an architectural type of fancy way, though it was your art for what you needed to do for the time. And like you said, you had this beautiful window
mm,
that while you're having a shower, you can look out and see the bush, and that was your constructed art. And so you've taken that, you've
mm.
built your house, you've got your excavator, so you can really go and construct art with the excavator. And as we did earlier this year, putting in a gabion wall out the front to now handle these storms that
Yeah.
we're getting. Um, how, with your business that you have now, so looking at the values that
Mm,
you've learned along the way and the values that you have in your family, the important things, like you said, you can't raise kids walking around on half finished decking. Um, and
no.
so I can see that a lot of the value would have had something to do with family in why you've grown a business, and not so much why, but how you've grown the business and why it's going to be successful in the future. What values
Mm,
do you do you what are your key values there that push you towards wanting to continue to succeed rather than just go, okay, I've done this now, I'll just compete completely. I'll continue to repeat.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good question, because at the end of the day, there's a million and one different ways that you can approach business, or what you want to do with your business, whether you want to grow it, how you want to grow it. Um, and at the end of the day, what's going to be right for me is not necessarily what's going to be right for you or for someone else. But you can evaluate it as to how it measures up against what's important for you. There's a million ways to succeed, but what really matters for you and your life and your values, as you say, for us, that's always family. I mean, to me, the most important thing in the world is my family. And a lot of people say that. You also have to make day-to-day decisions that make that a reality. So, like, for example, when we first started the business, we knew we were going to go through a period of time where it was going to be a lot of hard work, and it was going to be really, really tough and long hours. So, probably in the first year and a half to 2 years in the business, I was doing about 100 to 120 hours a week working in the business. That meant that I practically never saw the kids. So when I was working, I was flat out slogging away. We made a point of taking breaks, making time for holiday as a family. And it was sort of through that same period we took our first snow trip. I'd never even seen snow before. As you can see in the background, I completely fell in love with it.
You have completely.
But we would take these. I'm absolutely mental about snowboarding now. As you know, I mean, we're planning a trip to go to Japan, and I've been checking the webcams every day for the last 4 weeks. But yeah, I mean, that was about taking time for experiences that were going to matter to us as a family, time away from screens, time away from distractions, and just be together and do things that would make memories. So I was working 100 to 120 hours a week flat out, and it went on for a long time. But we would also, take a couple of weeks for holiday. Flew down. First trip was to Bulla. Spent a couple of weeks down in Melbourne and saw the snow for the first time on Bulla. Next year, we took a holiday in Thredbo, did the road trip, drove down in the car, spent a couple of days together in the car, telling jokes, telling stories, catching up with each other, and then 8 days on the snow. It was gorgeous, and then go back to work. But yeah. So the choices that we've made, and it sort of circles back to what you were saying, the whole rags to riches story. Not really, but when we were
For a lot of
prioritizing
people,
what we're
for a lot of
doing.
people, rags to riches, Daniel, is a lot of people have no idea how to get out of where they're at, and they feel that because they have nothing, how do they ever? They can't do it. So your type of story here in that rags to riches, rich not necessarily being I'm Elon Musk. It's rich being you've gotten to a point where you're safe,
Comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I'll take a moment to step sideways, because this is a really good segue. It could be really good advice for people, to recognize that it doesn't actually take that much to step from where you are to a totally different scenario. Like, if you think about it, when we made the jump to starting our own business, I was working a wage, I was working a decent wage, I had a qualification, I was skilled in my industry, and, I was being paid relatively well. But you get used to operating at your level of expenses, right? And so everything that I had was committed, everything went somewhere, and it all got used up. We didn't have much that was left. Taking on a little bit of extra, starting the business, starting to win the first couple of customers. If you think about it, you're paying all of your bills with whatever your income is. Let's say you're on $1,500 a week, and that's what hits your bank account after tax. That's a pretty good wage, but it's all going to get used up. If you suddenly start doing something else on the side, I mean, yes, it's extra work, but you make another $500 a week, you make another $1,000 a week. That's totally beyond what you're normally used to spending. And all of a sudden, you can start investing that, using that to put yourself forward, using that to make money. That's enough to buy an investment property. That's enough to pay off your mortgage. You put that into getting rid of your debts, and all of a sudden you're not paying extra interest to the bank. It's only a small quantity of money, but because it's all beyond what you're normally used to operating with, for me, I was astounded at how much progress we could make and how quickly just by making those little incremental steps.
And that's brilliant advice. That I use myself, and I have used, going from a contractor into starting my cladders as a business, and now with my cladders going into doing constructing art as a business. My cladders has become the one that's I'm not the contractor. We have my cladders, and my cladders as a business brings in a turnover every year. And so starting constructing art and growing constructing art, it can make $0, and it's just my own effort that I'm putting into that to grow that. Though from what I've learned in the past, I can go, well, all right, well, I'm going to just keep putting effort in, and as we might do a media project for someone and make $1,500 from that. That's $1,500 that we wouldn't have made somewhere else, that I'm doing in my own time. Like, for example, what day is it? Sunday, Christmas Eve, right?
Yeah, it's
So
Sunday
that's
on
a
Christmas
perfect
Eve and we're
segue.
doing a podcast.
Yeah, exactly. That
Yeah,
that point though is that you to go from nothing to something, you have to have a
yeah,
starting point. You need to have a job. You need to be able to be reliable to someone, and by being reliable to someone, someone's going to give you some money for that, and you live off that. And
yeah,
everything else that you do is a bonus towards growing your wealth for the future.
yeah, exactly. Here's a tip too. I find anytime I get focused too much on the dollar, I make bad decisions or bad presentations. But when you're working in your business, obviously there's the bottom line. Obviously you have to pay bills, and obviously you want a financial reward. There's nothing wrong with that. But the thing to remember is money's just a representation of the work that you've done. Money really only exists because we don't want to carry around buckets of eggs that our chickens laid or bread that we baked so that we can find someone who wants eggs or bread that we can swap for some other service that they have that we want. That's what money is really for in a
Yeah.
society. So at the end of the day, if you're a chicken farmer and you want lots of money, you need to be a damn good chicken farmer. You need to deliver lots of high quality product that people want. So, I mean, in my business, in my experience, I found that if I just concentrate on doing a great job for as many people as I can and letting more people know about the awesome work that I can do, and then really concentrating on delivering and making sure that I deliver. I mean, of course, you have to issue the invoices, you have to make sure you collect them, you have to do all of the business nuts and bolts. But the rest of it's not a problem because you deliver. And if you concentrate on delivering, the money never seems to be an issue.
It just keeps coming for every delivery.
Yeah.
And if you keep doing a
So at
good
the end of
job,
the day, the money
you keep
represents the
delivering.
delivery. Yeah, you got it. Yeah. So
Ah,
I always try to focus my attention back on that. Same thing with marketing. I don't know anything about marketing. I don't know anything about promotion, but I figure I've got to let more people know that I can do a really, really good job for them and that I want to, and I'm passionate about it. And the more people that know that, the more people are probably going to be interested in having a chat with me about helping them out and seeing how I could, you know? And that's essentially promotion, isn't it?
that's exactly. Well, word of mouth. I had someone say to me once that to be a good builder, you need to have good word of mouth. My father never advertised. I'm not going to advertise. It's all word of mouth. Well, word of mouth
Mm,
now is the internet, and word of mouth
mm,
is viral. So if one person knows one person, so it's the whole one person tell if someone has a good experience, they'll tell one or two people. If they have a bad experience,
Yeah.
they're going to tell 10 people. So it's as a business owner, our Gary
Yeah.
V says that as a business owner, we are marketers first and foremost. We're a marketing company that offers a service beneath our
Yeah.
marketing. And if we take that approach to things,
Isn't that funny?
then we go forward from that. So hence this is where this conversation came
Yeah, that's
about.
right.
You're asking me about marketing and well you need to because I mentioned to you about Salesforce is starting to market and we had our chat about why that was and said, well, let's do
Yeah.
a podcast together and talk about the things that relate to constructing art and what make people do what they do. So
Yeah.
on that, I kind of I think that people like to know I want to know where your favorite part of the house is, where your favorite part of your home is that makes you feel at home, makes you feel connected, and yeah, share us with what that is.
Kitchen.
The kitchen. Why?
No question. It's the kitchen. Kitchen's the heart. The kitchen's the heart and soul of the home. If you think about it, that's where you nourish your family, and that's where you spend that's where you spend the time where you're engaging with each other. You might love your TV room because it's got a nice big screen and great sound, but you don't build any memories in there. You sit there and you get entertained.
Mm.
And the bedrooms are great. They've got to be comfortable because you want to be able to rest. But you don't really do any living anywhere else. But the kitchen's where you live. The kitchen's where your friends come and you spend quality time and weekends together. It's where, hopefully you sit around the table at least once a day and share a meal and share your stories and talk to the kids about what their day was like and what's important to them. And it's where you sit down and resolve the problems that you need to face. It's where you talk about the things that are going well, the things that aren't, sorting them out. Kitchen's my favorite room in the house. Plus, it's gorgeous. Natasha worked her butt off on it, and she did a really good job.
It is a beautiful kitchen. It's a great spot. We've spent hours sitting around your table talking.
Haven't we had some good chats in there?
It has. Well, we didn't really spend much time at your rental. As soon as you have you built your home, it's well, like at our place, it's the same. We have our dining table, which is our kitchen. Our house is very, very the modern open plan. The whole thing is you sit around the kitchen table. We sit around the the kitchen bench or the dining table, and you just revolve around it. If you're in the lounge, you're still part of all of that area. So the more and more people I ask that same question, you just gave the best answer though. That answer was fantastic because it just nailed the important things in life and probably why you and I get along so well because we share so many values sitting around the table and knocking out, talking to the kids, knocking out problems of the day. I have a thing that we say what we're grateful for, and every day we go around, we write on a little post-it note, put it in a jar, and then we play board games. Not every day, but it's those times. And yes, Natasha did a fantastic job with that kitchen.
Oh my gosh, she's incredible. I mean, if she wasn't already my wife, I would hire her as a project manager in a heartbeat.
And that's another actual business thing there, right? So having people that you don't technically have to pay to assist with the running of business or consulting or like having a person that is like-minded in your goals and dreams. Like for me, I've got Jess in the office. Well, she's not in the office. She works from home. She'll barely ever step foot in our new office. She's not there, though she makes sure every single person is paid, makes sure that all the money's allocated where it needs to be to make sure it doesn't go anywhere else. And she's that silent one that goes there saying, we shouldn't do this or we should do this. And she's my conscience, I guess, to making sure that we make good decisions as a business, and making sure that it's nothing.
It's interesting that you say it that way, Yeah, it's really interesting that you say it that way because it's very similar for us in our business. You know, on paper, Natasha's essentially the financial controller, handles all of the bills, all of that sort of thing. But really, she's the sounding board and the sanity check, and we do all of our planning together. So, I am sort of the public facing and execution arm of the business, but all of our goal setting and planning and decision making goes between the two of us. And so, like if I'm disappearing too much into the office and it's affecting family life, for example, then she'll pull me up. We sit down, we have a chat. Okay, so what direction do we need to take the personnel and the planning and the resources of the business to be able to get us back to having the time and space that we need, that we really consider important? And we work that out together, and then we execute.
Right.
Just
What
give me
was
2
it yesterday
seconds.
that you said she was going to?
No problem. Yeah, we'll wrap up. Kids are
We are.
eating mum's brain. Don't you love Chrissy
Ooh!
holidays?
Look, I had Jess come in before, and I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah, we are very, very close. What did Natasha say to you? Oh, she was going to do yesterday to stop you from getting into your office because you don't yet have doors in your house.
Yeah, because we prioritized. We made a decision as an emotional decision for us. What was most important was that we knew that the house belonged to us and that nothing could ever happen and nothing could ever take it away. Not that it would, but if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, we want to know that we're secure and she's got a stable place and the kids will be fine. So we prioritized on putting the money into the offset, and we haven't prioritized other things. Like, for example,
Well,
none of the landscaping is done on the outside of the
or doors
property,
on the
and there are
house.
no doors inside the house.
And just to give a
There's
quick
doors on
background on the
the
doors,
outside of the house. There's just no
yeah,
internal doors.
you have curtain. You got what are they called? You've got shower curtains.
We got IKEA
Up to the-
curtains, and we
Yeah,
put
yeah.
them
But the
over
reason
the
for
rooms
that,
that needed privacy.
the reason for that though, is because you wanted a particular door or type of door that the builder wanted
Yeah.
1,000% profit margin on, because of that.
Yeah.
So no, but what did Natasha was going to put something across your without the existing door?
She
To
said
stop
she was
you
going to
getting in
get
your.
police caution tape and wind it back and forth across the front of the door so I can't get in over the holidays.
Well, I'm going to bring you when I
It's
come
classic.
over to your place next week. I'm sure it'll happen. I'm going to bring you some bollards and some
Yeah.
hazard tape that Natasha can implement that immediately.
Mate, this is Australia. All you need is 1 or 2 witches' hats.
Oh, mate, that won't stop you getting in the office. That won't stop you. You need a bit more than that. Now, as part of
I
what
do.
we do here on Constructing Art, dad
Uh-huh.
jokes. Here we go.
Oh,
And to bring
nice.
it into those not so cringe, this will make it cringe. Let's go,
Yeah.
says all the teenagers. So I'm going to check and see how the first one goes.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go that one. I'll go up. This isn't the main one. But knock, knock,
Who's there?
hatch.
Hatch who?
Oh, bless you. My apologies. That was
That's
horrible.
terrible.
Very, very bad.
That's terrible.
No, we won't. There's some really bad ones. So here we go. It's got to be on this one.
I'll tell you one, Kenny.
Oh, no, this is perfect. Are you ready? It's Christmas tomorrow. You can give me you can give me yours because everyone comes up. The whole idea is I'll give you one and then you give me one back, and so it's which one's going to be better. And you've got to try not to laugh. I'm joking. You'll laugh.
Yeah.
All right. Merry Christmas to start with, Daniel. I'd like to start with that, and let's move on to the question.
Merry Christmas to you, mate.
What's green, covered in tinsel, and goes ribbit?
What?
A mistletoe.
That's horrifying.
It's terrible. It's terrible.
That's horrifying.
Now, shoot me. Shoot. Go.
All right. I'll have to leave you with this one, or I'm not going to be available for our next catch up because I won't have any legs. Did you know that every time Chuck Norris looks in the mirror, the glass shatters?
No.
That's because not even glass is silly enough to get between Chuck Norris and Chuck Norris.
Daniel, thank you so much for this chat. This impromptu. It's not impromptu at all. I'm talking rubbish now. Thank you so
Spent
much for
weeks
being
trying to
part
get
of
this together.
Oh, well, it has been. The best part about it is you've now gained a nice rug to do practicing on for your snowboarding skill set so that you can
Yep.
continue your skill set. Because, like you said in this podcast, you've got to build the skill set before you can really go and start delivering.
Yeah, that's correct.
So
Very
you've
nice.
gained that. You've gotten yourself a microphone. You've got yourself a nice little setup there, and I can't wait to maybe catch up and make this an annual Christmas Eve podcast and see where we're at in 12 months' time.
It's a date. Let's do it.